everybody, this is Erica, the technology nerd who likes to film stuff, and just a few weeks ago I had reviewed the Galaxy Note 3. Now the Galaxy Note 3 was a really awesome phone. This is a phone that I am very impressed with, especially with all the new features of the S Pen. They're just integrated so well, and I think that this is pretty much the greatest thing since cheese, especially for college students, for example, for people who really like to write things down. I found myself using the S Pen non-stop. So when I had a chance to come across the Galaxy Note 10.1 2014 edition, I was really excited to compare it with the Galaxy Note 3. This year has been a very interesting year because there's been all kinds of huge phones that are coming out that look pretty much like tablets. So I figured, hey, why not use the Galaxy Note 10.1 2014 edition and really see if it stacks up. This guy is pretty much a tablet already, so should you go all out for the Galaxy Note 10.1 2014 edition, or should you stick with the Galaxy Note 3? So this is kind of like a commentary, like impressions video. I want to talk a little bit about the Galaxy Note 10.1 2014 edition and tell you what my experience has been thus far with it. So first of all, I want to start off with the size, kind of a comparison between the actual looks of these devices. Now I say that the Galaxy Note 3 is pretty much a tablet already considering its size. At 5.7 inches, this display is already quite large already. The display on the Galaxy Note 10.1 is, well, 10.1 inches. And when you hold them up side by side, you're really given the perspective of the sizes here. Now, taking a little bit of a closer look at the appearance of these devices, the first thing that I want to point out is going to be the quality of the back covers. Now, depending on whether you get the white version of the tablet or the black version of the tablet, it's exactly the same thing going on with the Galaxy Note 3. The black version of the Galaxy Note 3, in addition to it looking like faux leather, also has more of a rubbery texture. It feels more like thermoplastic polyurethane, and it reminds me of faux leather because it does have that feeling. Now, if you get the white version of the Galaxy Note 3, it's going to feel exactly like the white version of the Note 10.1 2014 edition. It's going to be entirely plastic. It doesn't have the rubbery feel to it. That's most likely because with the rubbery texture, the white can tend to stain. So they've decided to just keep it white textured plastic, just like the white Note 3. You can see this faux leather texture here, indeed just like the Note 3. Also, it's got that fake stitching as well. It's not bad, it's a lot better than that glossy plastic that they've always been using, but it doesn't feel as premium as the black one, so if it was my choice, I would definitely go black. Also, another thing to mention is that the back cover comes off of the Galaxy Note 3. Just like every other tablet that Samsung has made, the back cover does not come off. I really don't see anybody interchanging an 8,220 mAh battery anyway. As for the thickness, it's very hard to tell, but the tablet is just a tad thicker. On our Galaxy Note 3, we have a 13 megapixel camera. This is actually a pretty decent camera. What we have on here is an 8 megapixel sensor only. The pictures are just alright. It's not as terrible as a camera as some other tablets I've seen, but I would definitely not be using this guy in general day-to-day usage. You can see though that the design here is exactly the same. As for your standard headphone jack, it's on the top of the Galaxy Note 3 versus the left-hand side on the Galaxy Note 10.1. I think that the placement is alright, it's not getting in the way. At least they were smart enough not to put something like this on the bottom. On the top here we have the volume rocker and also our power button. I've never liked the placement of the volume rocker at the top. It's just very confusing. Not only is it right next to the power button and I'm not sure what I'm pressing on sometimes, but it's hard to make the distinction when you're not looking at it, what is volume up and what is volume down. So it's a bit fiddly. And we've also got the IR blaster on the top as well, the same as the Galaxy Note 3. In addition to having 16 or 32 gigabyte configurations that I have seen, there's also a micro SD card slot. I definitely think that's a bonus, especially when we have something like the iPad that you get confined to storage with. On the bottom, the only thing that we have is the micro USB port. That's a little bit of a bummer because on the Galaxy Note 3 you have the USB 3.0 port. So yes, no USB 3.0 for this guy. One of the biggest advantages that the tablet has over the phone is the fact that it's got stereo speakers. We have one right here, and we've also got one on the other side, and luckily they're actually quite loud. I've considered the speaker quality pretty decent. That's something that the Galaxy Note 3 really failed on. This poor guy has a pathetic single speaker on the bottom. It does get pretty loud as well, but the quality was just something to be desired. As for what we are protected with here, there really is no true word from Samsung whether this is Gorilla Glass 3 or Gorilla Glass at all. At least with the Galaxy Note 3, I'm pretty sure it's Gorilla Glass 3. The texture and feel of the glass is very reminiscent to what we have on the Galaxy S4. So on the Galaxy Note 3, yeah, it's probably Gorilla Glass 3, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's Gorilla Glass 3 on the Galaxy Note 10.1 either. But either way, it's a scratch-resistant tempered glass of some sort with oleophobic capabilities, so it's probably not going to matter all that much. When considering the tablet, you have actually two different versions. There's the Wi-Fi version and also the LTE version. Whether you get the Wi-Fi or the LTE version, the top is going to be exactly the same. If you're to get something like the Galaxy Note 8.0, if you get the version that has data capabilities on the 8.0, you do have the receiver grill at the top, just like you would have on the Galaxy Note 3. But of course, I don't foresee anyone walking around holding the tablet up to their ear, so it looks like they just 86'd having the receiver. So basically, we have a 2-megapixel front-facing camera and what looks to be an ambient light sensor. And along the bottom, just like we have on the Galaxy Note 3, they're still keeping these hardware buttons. After having a lot of time with non-hardware button tablets, I really wish that Samsung would finally get rid of these hardware buttons. While they work okay on the Galaxy Note 3, they're really in the way on the Galaxy Note 10.1. Just say that I am using this to make Skype calls. I'm trying my hardest to hold the tablet. Sometimes it's not so comfortable to hold it around the edges and I want to hold it from the bottom, but then I'm always placing my thumb on the back button, which also reminds me that they put the microphone on the bottom of the tablet. That's not a very smart place to put it. They really should have put the microphone at the top. So not only am I accidentally activating buttons here and there, but I'm also accidentally obstructing that microphone all the time. Having a screen this size for Skype calls is quite awesome, so it's a little bit unfortunate that they did not keep that in mind. At least, though, the placement of the S Pen is actually quite a smart idea. A lot of people are right-handed. I'm sorry, two lefties out there. But for those of you who are right-handed, it's very simple just to reach up at the top and pull it outward, so they did keep some thought as to where to store this. And just like on the Galaxy S3, you can place it in either way. It's the same on both sides. The only difference that you have with these pens are just the length. I can use these pens interchangeably. It doesn't matter which one I use, whether it's the tablet one or the one for the phone. So design-wise, it's okay, but it's a little bit hit and miss. If you're going to have a device this big, though, the placement of certain things are quite important. And my biggest thought is that they really need to get rid of these buttons here. Now, as for specs, these devices are very similar depending on which one you get. I see that there are 3 different models. So there's either a Wi-Fi and 3G, which have the exact same internals inside of them in terms of the SoC, and then you've also got the LTE version, which is the only Snapdragon version. What I have here is a Snapdragon version of the Galaxy Note 3. So what I have essentially right here is the Exynos version of the Galaxy Note 3. So for the Wi-Fi and 3G versions of this tablet, you've got the Exynos 5420 SoC. This guy is the octa-core model, same thing as the 3G one, meaning it's got 2 4-core clusters. The first one is 4 Cortex-A15 cores clocked at 1.9 GHz. Those are the higher powered cores, and then the second cluster is 4 lower powered cores, 4 Cortex-A7s clocked at 1.3 GHz. And we're seeing the new Mali T628MP6 GPU. So I've had a chance to play around with this a little bit. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But otherwise, the LTE version of the tablet is the standalone model with the Snapdragon. Just like this guy, it's quad-core. It's got the Snapdragon S800 SoC, 4 Crate 400 cores clocked at 2.3 GHz, and the Adreno 330 GPU. Now, as for availability in the United States, so far I have only been able to find the Wi-Fi version. Looking at the LTE version, I do see one band that should work on LTE in Canada, but LTE is not going to be working in the United States with this tablet. But if you end up with the LTE version for whatever reason you're using it here, the 3G bands should work just fine. I do see the 850 band there, so you should be able to use it on AT&T. And if you get the 3G version only of the tablet, I do see the 850 band as well. Honestly, for me, if I was going to get this tablet, I would go all out and pay the money for at least the 3G model. It's really nice that if you're somebody in the United States, you can actually use your phone SIM card inside of the tablet, which is not a luxury that we usually get. Usually tablets are blocked from being able to use the phone SIM, so you end up having to pay for a second plan for data, and then you also have to pay for your phone as well. So if you're going to have a phone and a tablet, and you're in the United States, you might as well go all out and just get at least the 3G version. Moving on to usability, I know that KitKat was just released and Android 4.3 is now technically obsolete. There are so many devices that don't even have 4.3 yet, so it's really nice to see 4.3 on this tablet. I am currently running on the newest update, and what I'm a little bit disappointed about is that even though this is 4.3, and even though we do have users, I don't seem to be able to set up a restricted profile like I can on my Nexus 7. I can simply add user, but then it gives you the standard fare about setting up just a normal profile where everyone has their own standard controls. And at this point it just asks you if you want to set it up or you can do it later. But if we're going to be faithfully calling this Jelly Bean 4.3, why couldn't they have just added restricted profile? With restricted profiles, these work incredibly well, especially with children or even family members that you don't want touching certain things or getting access to certain things. I can go ahead and disable Chrome and prevent people from being able to connect to the internet. I can add or prevent certain games if I'd like to. This was one of the bonuses and essences of 4.3, so to not add it is a little bit insulting. As for what is included in TouchWiz, if we go underneath the settings, everything is primarily the same. It's just a different color scheme. I see all the basic same stuff except for I don't have NFC on the tablet, and of course on Wi-Fi only versions we're not going to have network settings for mobile networks. The biggest difference that I see with these TouchWiz UIs is that the controls are a little bit different. There are some things on the Galaxy Note 3 that you don't get on the Galaxy Note 10.1. I don't know if this is really going to make much of a difference to people, but you're losing one-handed operation, which you probably wouldn't need on a tablet, and you're losing air gesture and air view. Air view is where you can take your finger and hover it over a link and it will make it larger for you. Or if you're underneath your video screen, you can simply take your finger and a little pop-up preview of the video will show up. You can basically pan through a video without having to move the time bar. So that was something that I always found handy, but you still have this option with the S Pen. They just don't want you using your finger for some reason. So here are your air view options. On the Galaxy Note 3, you can see it says pen and finger options, where you only have pen options here. You are also missing air gesture. Things such as quick glance, air jump, air browse, and air accept call. The only ones that I can see relevant to a tablet are air jump and air browse. When you use air browse, you can move your hand over the sensor and you can go through different pictures in your gallery, or you can pan up and down in web pages if you move your hand up and down. Those I could definitely see as useful, but again I can see that they're really pushing you to use the pen. Also, sadly, I noticed that they don't include increased touch sensitivity. Increased touch sensitivity works really great for gloves. So for example, I have a glove, and we don't have increased touch sensitivity on, and you can see that I'm not really getting anywhere. If I go ahead and enable it, you can see that now my screen is responding. So that's a little bit of a bummer with the display this size that they did not add increased touch sensitivity. I guess they are really expecting you to use the pen. As for the launcher UI itself, it mostly feels pretty snappy, but I'm noticing a considerable amount of S-lag. I would be incredibly curious to get my hands on the Snapdragon version and see if it's the same thing, because I'm noticing that this guy just sometimes can't keep up. One of my biggest annoyances is that this seems to have a little bit of lag when I am typing. It's not so responsive sometimes. Having a tablet this big, that's a little bit important. I have tried several different keyboards. SwiftKey seems to be the best. You do have the option, though, to split keyboard, and that has made life a little bit easier, but I really do wish that it was just a tad bit more responsive. Half the time, I find myself breaking out the pen. You can see that when I hover the pen, this little pen icon appears, and then I can just simply write. Ta-da! This brings me into gameplay. I really don't care for benchmarks. And anyway, I've been looking at benchmarks and it scores fairly well, but it looks like the user experience just doesn't seem to match what the benchmarks are saying. For one thing, benchmarks aren't as smart as they should be for testing these devices, and for another thing, Samsung locks the CPU to the highest frequency it can while doing these benchmarks. So in standard day-to-day usage, who knows what the actual user experience is going to really be like? While playing games like Need for Speed, sometimes I notice that the game just pauses for a couple of seconds. There seems to be a severe lag here and there. This device has already been updated, so there really is no excuse for any lagginess like that. Most of the time it plays very smoothly, and it's a very nice experience, especially on a screen this size. But just once in a while, I see it just completely pauses and freezes up, and that's just completely not excusable. What I'm really hoping for is to get rid of Samsung's TouchWiz entirely and have something else installed on this to really give it a fair go. On my Snapdragon Note 3, I simply just never had any of that crazy lagginess or pauses during gameplay. If any of you have the Exynos version of the tablet as well, I'd be very interested to hear what you have to say. I have seen other reviewers complaining about pauses during gameplay as well, so it seems to be a common lag issue. But come on, Samsung, that's just not excusable. As for the display, we have some major differences. Of course, the biggest difference being the screen technology itself. On the Galaxy Note 3, we have a very saturated looking AMOLED panel, so of course you get those really nice deep blacks. And a lot of people like the punchy colors. Very wide gamut display. And what we've got on this guy is an LCD display, Super LCD. Of course, with LCD, you're not going to get the blacks that you have on AMOLED, and that just has to do with the fact that LCD displays are backlit, so you always have light showing through. And with an AMOLED display, every subpixel is like its own little light bulb or own little LED. So when you display black, the pixels are going to do their very best to actually be off. And I'm seeing that the newest displays that Samsung is making actually have blacks that don't seem to be having the color channels leaking. So it seems that you're actually getting true black now. What I like about this display is that it has really decent viewing angles. I don't want to get into crazy depth with the display, but I do have some measurements that I want to show you to let you know what's going on with the calibration. In very basic terms, with this device, the calibration is really not that bad. I'm happy to see that we have a gamut or color range that's looking closer to sRGB, unlike a lot of Samsung's tablets. I do see a little bit of wonkiness going on with the saturations, as these colored dots are not in straight lines and they're not evenly spaced. Though I can tell that something is a little bit off with the colors, it doesn't look terrible at all. The biggest thing that I can tell that's going on with this device is with the gamma. It seems that this device has several modes that you can't disable, so if you're underneath the web browser, the contrast is going to be tweaked depending on what you're looking at, and I was able to actually catch that in measurements. In other places, this mode does not apply, and the gamma looks a lot more tame. So it's not perfect, it's not terrible, it seems to be just fine for normal day-to-day usage, and I had a decent time watching movies as well. I think just about anybody will be satisfied with this display. One of the things to mention is the type of display that this is. What we have here is a WQ-XGA Super Clear LCD. The resolution is 2560 by 1600. This is the exact same resolution that we have on the Nexus 10. The resolution on the Nexus 10 is just stupidly sharp. But somehow, and I'm going to tell you why, this display does not look as sharp, and yes, actually it's pretty noticeable. This display is a really nice, pretty display, has a very wide range of colors, so quality-wise, it's on par with the best on the market. Now look at this arrangement. The reason that this doesn't look as sharp as the Nexus 10 is because we can call this pen tile. It's actually what you would call red, green, blue, white pen tile, or RGBW pen tile. So in all fairness, every pixel is supposed to have 3 subpixels, red, green, and blue. So it goes red, green, blue, red, green, blue, red, green, blue, and they're all tightly packed. You can see how they have a stripe arrangement. This tends to look the nicest. But when you go back and look at the type of display that we have here, one subpixel would be fair to say is red-green, and the next subpixel is fair to call it blue-white. So overall you have less subpixels, and it doesn't look as sharp because of that. On a lot of things it looks just dandy and you can't tell the difference. But on some things, such as this web browser icon that I'm just holding the display up to, you can see those little white pixels showing there, and it tends to pull down that resolution. So why do this? The idea is to get a brighter display because of those whites. They're unfiltered, so backlight just purely goes right through them. Trying to get a brighter display without expending so much power. Sure, yeah, that's nice. It's a nice display. I even like it. Once in a while I get a little bit bugged at the fact that it's not RGB stripe, but it's not a terrible complaint overall. Now continuing on with the display and just the sheer size of this display, as I mentioned in the beginning, I absolutely love the S Pen. If I was still in college, this would be hands down the #1 tablet that I would choose, despite the downsides. The S Pen suite inside this thing is nothing short of fantastic. Just like the Galaxy Note 3, you have everything from Action Memo, to Scrapbooker, to Screen Write, to S-Finder, to Pen Window. I would really advise now to check down the link in the description if you want to get a very good idea of what all of these do, because I won't be able to cover them in great depth here. So I will put a time-coded link in the description to jump to this exact place in my Galaxy Note 3 review, because I think that this is absolutely fantastic, all these features here. So just like the Galaxy Note 3, we have all of the S Pen features. The entire S Pen suite is there. Just S-Note itself is an incredibly useful tool. I was just messing around and created this little file called Animal Matters, and you can see I'm able to pull down to preview, and I can add pages, or I can go back to what I was working on. Now I'm in editing mode. So what's really nice is that I have pen mode only. Right here there's a box so I can have S Pen only. That way my fingers and things don't interfere. So you can see now I can rest my palm here. I ended up zooming in. But you can see I'm not causing any problems with my content. So I can simply just rest my hand down while writing. So I can say, this is a test. And then after writing, I can go ahead and I can take my lasso tool. I can then lasso around what I have here, the entire thing. And it's going to recognize this entire thing for me. I can choose to transform it, so I'm going to say transform into, and I'm going to say text. And now you can see it says this is a test. I actually did this for all the text that you can see here, so I can easily write things out. So in class, if I need to, I can quickly write things out as long as it's somewhat legible. And then later I can turn it into editable text. So this is fantastic. You can also add pie charts, and really you can make things that look like Excel pages. There are just so many things that you can do. Whee! I created a shape here. It looks like a little smiley face. Of course, you can just start off with text if you'd like. And with Samsung's own keyboard, you can simply just write everything out here as well. So there's several different ways to recognize handwriting. Hello there. My handwriting sucks, but it still happened to recognize it. Yay! Under Insert, you can insert everything from voice memos to images to videos. I already showed you Easy Chart. You can make illustrations. You can put things from your clipboard that you've already copied. You can import things from Scrapbook. If you want to know how to do that, I would recommend going down to the link in the description that I am sharing for you. That way you can click on the time code and it will bring you right to it. You can also import maps and write all over them. There's just an impressive amount of stuff that you can do here, and I've actually been having quite a bit of fun with this lately. I myself love to write on my own Galaxy Note 3, and even on this tablet, I found it to be a really great experience. So with the help of the S Pen only mode, this device becomes incredibly comfortable to write on. You don't have to worry about making extraneous marks. It just feels very natural. Also, you get a really nice feedback from the rubber tip of the S Pen. Also, this becomes incredibly practical because you can export this. You can say select all or select any of the pages that you want, and then you can actually export it as a PDF file, so that is monumentally useful. I actually find it funny because this past week I went a little bit overboard on the notes because I found this really good audiobook called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie from audible.com. If you don't know what Audible is, they're actually an Amazon company, which means if you download the app or if you go on the internet, you can sign in with your Amazon username and password. What I really love about them is that they have 150,000 downloadable audiobook titles that are from every genre that you can possibly think of. So they are the leading provider in audiobooks. So How to Win Friends and Influence People is a pretty life-changing audiobook that my dad had talked about for years. So this book means a lot to me. After listening to it, I can see it's incredibly useful for people who want to be their own boss, or even for those of you who are really wanting to make content on YouTube, and to learn how to influence your audience the way that you want to. At the end of each section, they talk about the principles and they go over them. And what I love about this is that there's just such obvious techniques that work really well with people that people just don't use. The techniques are so simple and they're relationship changing with your loved ones or even your coworkers. So I totally recommend checking out this book. Please check out audible.com/Erica. You can download this book completely free, or you can download another book that you'd like. I personally love the self-development section. There's all kinds of really good stuff under there. And it's free if you follow audible.com/Erica. You can download it onto your Android, you can download it onto your iPhone, or you can just download the AA file and listen to it on your computer. So I personally love what Audible offers. I've been a fan of them for 10 years. So check them out! The last thing that I want to talk about in this video is the battery life. They only give you a 2-amp charger, which is pretty measly. The worst thing about having a 2-amp charger is that this device has over an 8,000 milliamp hour battery. With a 2-amp charger, it takes like 7 hours or more to charge this thing, so this is really an all-nighter for charging. So if you want to just sporadically charge it when it's low, nah, you can't do that. You really need to pay attention to charge it overnight. Also with the 2 amp charger, if you have it plugged into the wall, it tends to be eating more power than it's actually charging it with. So there are times where I'm using it for Skype and the battery actually dies while it's charging and while it's plugged in. So the battery will actually die as it's plugged in, which shouldn't happen. So if you're using it heavily, charging it at the same time is futile. So just remember to charge it all night and it will generally last you all day. Of basic use all throughout the day, I can get about a 10-hour charge on this guy. And using it pretty heavily, watching a lot of Netflix, browsing the web all day long, playing some games here and there. Now keep in mind this is the Wi-Fi only one. I'm able to get about 6 hours of screen time, sometimes a little bit more than that. So these numbers aren't impressive, but it definitely will get you through the day. Just remember, like I keep saying, make sure to charge it overnight and you should be fine. So thank you everybody for watching. This has been Erica, the technology nerd who likes to film stuff. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. And please remember to check out the links in the description so that you can follow them to my Galaxy Note 3 video. My Galaxy Note 3 video is an hour long, but it is time-coded, and also the links are time-coded as well, so you shouldn't have any problem bouncing around to where you need to get. Overall, this is a really nice device if you're somebody who is like a college student and you need to have a tablet that you can write on. It feels so much better than just carrying around a bunch of notebooks. When I went to UCSD, I could totally get away with just bringing this guy, taking all my notes in class. It's really what I would have done. And this would have been a really great asset for that. But if you're somebody who really doesn't care about the note-taking aspect, I'd probably go with something like the Galaxy Note 3, or even the Nexus 7 if you really want a tablet. So let me know what you all think about this device, whether you would go for the big guy or the regular-sized guy right here. So have a good night, you guys!